I would say, well, the biggest experience is really Thailand, where we went from training about 30 people in rural development who knew nothing about rural development. And we really didn't teach them about the content of rural development. We just got them together to see what they thought about rural development, what they wanted to achieve with rural development, and we took them through the AIC process. And then they went out to 15 villages, and they repeated the process and were astonished to see that they could do it. After about two trials, they could do it on their own. But I did want to come back to your first question, because it's really the most important of all, is why does this work especially well in rural development? Well, in conditions where people don't have hope and everything, to teach people that the source of their power, in other words, where does their control field come from? Where does their influence field come from? Where does their appreciative field come from? And to say all of that power comes from your purpose and is determined by this. Now, people in rural development, in poor areas, they have purpose. So they have the source of power, whereas we're brought up to think the source of power is the control of resources. So to have money, to have good land, to have all of those things. Whereas the real source of power is for you to be able to imagine what could be brought about. So it's in your imagination of the possibilities of purpose that anybody anywhere can do. And through their imagination, if they can get, you know, the people who would have control over those things, the people who would influence those possibilities and those ideas, and the people affected by them, and they get them all together working on these things, become so efficient, because they're not like 10 little projects competing with each other for resources and competing with each other for influence and control. They're all working to some common purposes, and people just get so energized and so excited about it.
What have you seen as some of the most memorable outcomes of that kind of organizing?
Well, I think, again, it was in Thailand because once people start to do this, you see, you would have some specialists, like say in the fisheries, you might have it focused on fishing, but once you bring in the community, and then those affected by it, if your project's important enough, you'll have people from the state government, the national government, the political parties in, and they start seeing this and they say, oh, I've got a problem like this in my area. So it spreads from fisheries into other areas, and this is what happened in Thailand. It spread from rural development into urban development, into industrial development, and eventually affected the government. Initially negatively, because all these great big meetings with an authoritarian government they were afraid of. And the Constitution didn't actually allow for such large meetings. But we started doing workshops with the government, getting the government and the NGOs together, and then they began to see that this wasn't dangerous. In fact, it did a lot of their work for them. It made their work a lot easier, so they actually changed the Constitution to allow these big AIC meetings to go on.